Which investment is better, the S&P 500 or the MSCI World? This is the ultimate showdown. In this video, I'm comparing the investments of the most popular investments of all time, the S&P 500 and the MSCI World. I'll be discussing the pros and cons of each index, comparing them head to head in terms of the performance, cost and risk. And as a bonus at the end, I'll be providing a conclusion on which investment may be a better option for you. Hi, I'm Björn and this is the Avenue to Revenue, in which we build wealth the simple way. First, before we deep dive into the head-to-head comparison, let's briefly talk about the MSCI World Index. This index is a market capitalization weighted index that includes 1,511 companies from 23 developed markets around the world. One of the main advantages of investing in the MSCI World Index is that it provides diversification by including companies from a variety of countries and sectors, in which the US alone contributes to 67%. This can help to reduce risk in your own portfolio. Additionally, the MSCI World Index has historically performed well and has a strong track record of returns. On the other hand, the S&P 500 is a market capitalization weighted index that includes the 500 largest publicly traded companies in the US. One of the main advantages of investing in the S&P 500 is that it includes some of the largest and most well-established companies in the world, which can provide stability in your portfolio. Additionally, the S&P 500 has also historically performed well and has a strong track record of returns. However, one disadvantage of investing in the S&P 500 is that it is focused solely on the United States, so it doesn't provide the same level of diversification as the MSCI World Index. Additionally, because the S&P 500 is focused on larger companies, it may not provide as much exposure to smaller and emerging companies. So now we're here and looking at the MSCI World as well as the S&P 500 of iShares. As I said, it's important to compare them head to head, and that's what we do right now. The reason, and they're different versions of the MSCI World as well as the S&P 500. I want to be fully transparent. I basically picked the most popular, the most common ones, which you can tell from the fund size. So we're talking here 42 billion and 49 billion of fund size of each of those respective ETFs. With a TER of 0.2% or 0.07%, which is really cheap, I would say. 0.2% is absolutely fine. I would say 0.07% is a bargain. But let's have a look at the pros and cons of each of those respective ETFs. Both have strong advantages and some disadvantages. We'll go into the actual performance as well. And just as an overall, what we can see, we're mid-end of January 2023, we see that basically from the 52 weeks low high, we are rather to the left, which means rather to a low. So, but if you would look into your portfolio, you probably see kind of low performance as well. So that's obviously being visualized and being shown within the S&P 500 and the MSCI World as well. Over long term, we see that the iShares MSCI World was performing around 22%, and the S&P 500, the US market, let's say 27% over a 3 years window, which basically means, breaking it down, you could roughly say per year there's around like 8-9% with the S&P 500. You could expect, and then here around 7% before tax, obviously, and inflation. And again, you know, some years, and we'll see later on, some years are really outperforming and maybe at 15-20%, and then you'll see market situations just as we're in right now, where we actually, or the market is underperforming. So you can never say it's like every year 7%, for instance. So just to keep in mind. Looking at the years, and that's probably what I kind of alluded to. If we jump back in time to 2019, we see around 33% of performance. And then the very next year, significant drop, but still performing around 7 or 6 to 8%. Then again, a high jump up in terms of performance, 32, the US market, almost 40%. And then 2022, what a shocker of a year, significant decline in the market, around 13%. The year actually of 2023, again, we're at the mid or end of January 2023. The year is actually looking quite positive so far. However, I've been listening to a lot of analysts and different experts in the field. They expect that the next coming weeks, so Q1, will be that they're expecting a significant decline of another 10, potentially 20% of the market. I was also listening to the CEO of Microsoft, who was saying the next 2 years for the tech market in particular will be rocky. So just this as an inside information. And when I say tech market, that would probably mean that that could potentially impact the S&P 500 market more than the broadly diversified MSCI World. So let's look into the risk, where performance is also risk, and usually a great indicator of risk is the volatility, the vola. And if we look, I'm a long-term investor, so let's have a look at the vola of 5 years. And when I invest, or I'm investing into, with a time horizon of 10, 15, 20 years. So I'm looking at the vola of 5 years, which is around 18% or 22% within the S&P 500, which basically means if you would invest, let's say 100,000 into the MSCI World, you could expect 18,000 euro, US dollar, whatever your currency is, in a drop, as well as dropping up and down above and below 100,000. The volatility with the S&P 500, not surprisingly, is higher, with 22%, and that's purely driven because it's less diversified. There are 500, the biggest 500 companies in the US, and that's why the volatility is obviously higher, as within the MSCI World, around 1,600 companies, also smaller companies included. Hence, volatility is rather low, which is a good sign if you want to have like a steady growth and if you want to sleep well at night. So let's look into the performance, and I think that's what we are all mostly interested in. There are several factors to be addressed and to be looked at once you're investing into an ETF. And one is like the cost and volatility and the risk, and then obviously the performance. And let's have a look at this. You see, and I'm doing the maximum from 2010 up to today, and here we're comparing. I'll just change the colors to make it more visible for you. And again, have a look at justetf.com. It's a great tool to really deep dive into different ETFs and see how the performance is, the cost, the TR, and how they're doing over time. And you can actually compare them as I do right now for you. So if you're using and would invest into the broadly diversified global MSCI World, you see that there's nice steady growth over since, let's say, a launch of that particular MSCI ETF, which is great. Comparing it, however, then to the S&P 500, you can see that basically the US market outperformed the global economy. Is that good or bad? Don't know.
That might mean that it's coming down in the future more, maybe not. So, and you could see at the beginning it was like very even, very similar, and then at a certain point of time around 2015 you could see it's outperforming the global economy. In terms of the up and down, it's looking very, very similar, I would say, to the global economy. However, the peaks and troughs are more significant with the MSCI, with the S&P 500. Again, which makes sense if you have less companies in your actual portfolio. So just to keep in mind, if you're a person where you can sleep well, even though the peaks and troughs are higher, you're probably good with the S&P 500. And again, also the S&P 500 is well diversified. However, it's a bet on the US economy. And I was also listening a lot to Ray Dalio, and he was speaking about the rise and falls of new leaders and new powers in the future, where obviously China and somewhere maybe even India is playing a larger role. So if the Chinese market would pick up and maybe gains more power, then that could potentially have a significant impact in the US market. If you want to be very broadly diversified, the MSCI World is probably the place to be. And I'm personally investing into the MSCI World. And however, it's also not fully reflecting the emerging markets. So what I did is I was basically picking the MSCI World, and then adding the emerging markets to it. And I weighted it 80-20, 80% into the emerging market, 20% into the emerging markets and 80% into the MSCI World. And the MSCI World as well is around 60% covering the US. So from that perspective, US is heavily weighted also within the MSCI World. Let's have a look at a few more performance metrics. So maybe let's jump into 1 year performance. So we look at the global economy. Over a period of 1 year, we've seen a decline of 6% and the US market of -7%. Jumping into the 5 years perspective, we see that the MSCI World performed 53% of growth, which is fantastic. And let me change the colors again, because red usually means decline or bad. So it's not. So let's just clearly distinguish the blue, the MSCI World, 53% growth over 5 years, and the S&P 500, a whopping 72%. And just have a look into the year to date. We've been just a few weeks into this new year, but you can see that the MSCI World is outperforming now with 3.4%, basically almost doubled the US market. So we see that the US market is struggling right now more, which could be a potential bargain situation, as the US market will probably pick up somewhen the speed. It could be end of the year, it could be next year, in 2 years' time. Again, as a long-term investor, you shouldn't be worried too much about this. Now, this one is a nice graph as well, which I like a lot. So this bubble chart, basically on the y-axis, you see the performance annualized. And then on the x-axis, you see the actual volatility, what I pointed out earlier on. And the size basically of the bubbles represents the actual fund size. So they're very, very decent. From that perspective, you shouldn't be worried that iShares or BlackRock is taking that ETF out of their portfolio. So that's safe. So, however, we see that the MSCI World compared to the S&P 500 is having a lower volatility, basically now in a more more graphically being displayed. So MSCI World not as volatile as the S&P 500. Okay. So, and then again, in terms of looking at just 1 year period, also the MSCI World is outperforming in terms of growth, which is still negative though, to the US market. So less volatile and better performance. That's what we are ideally looking for. This is just a 1 year picture though. Let's jump into the 3 years. You see that the picture is changing. So here we see that the volatility is still higher, and usually it remains higher of the US market because it's less diversified compared to the MSCI World, and therefore the performance is higher. Okay, and then let's jump into the 5 years. How does it look like in 5 years time? And then let's go into the max since 2010, I think it was. Show the colors, and then you see a return of 13.4% with a higher of 18.7% volatility, and then 10% performance with a 15% volatility. So if you're risk averse and you still want to have a nice steady solid growth over a period of time, MSCI World is a place to go. Or to be considered, at least, I would say. And then the S&P 500, if you can live with the steep potential peaks and troughs, you can expect a higher return.
Before jumping into the conclusion, I want to be transparent to you. I'm reflecting here my own perspective, and I'm not a financial advisor. I'm simply sharing my own investment experience, which works really well for me. It is always good to do your own research before making any investment decisions. With that out of the way, in conclusion, both the MSCI World Index and the S&P 500 are strong investment options that have performed well historically. However, the MSCI World Index provides a more diverse portfolio by including companies from a variety of countries and sectors, while the S&P 500 provides a more focused portfolio of the largest and most well-established companies in the United States. Ultimately, the choice between the two will depend on your very own investment goals and risk tolerance. I'm rather risk averse, however, still want to have a solid performance. That's why I bet on the global economy and even add the emerging markets into my own portfolio, as I believe they will increase in their economic importance in the future. For those who strongly believe in the US market and can sleep well at night with large gains but also large losses, the S&P 500 might be worth to look at in more detail. If you found this video helpful, please subscribe so you can watch more useful videos and build wealth the simple way. If you're interested in one of those two indexes, you must check out either this one or this one, in which I analyzed all nitty-gritty details for each index individually. Cheers, and I'll see you in the next video.